The winter of '68 came in with teeth bared. Out on the Montana plains, the wind didn't just blow, it screamed. It tore across the Blackfeet territory like a ghost, promising nothing but long, hungry months ahead. Running Wolf stood at the door of his lodge, his eyes narrowed against the biting air, scanning the endless white horizon. For 3 days, there'd been no sign of his friend, Swift Arrow. 3 days was too long for a hunting trip. The whole camp felt it, a quiet dread that hung in the air thicker than the smoke from the fires. As the sun bled out across the snow, painting the ground in shades of blood and ice, a shape appeared. A horse. Running Wolf knew that horse. It was Swift Arrow's. But the rider was a broken thing, slumped over, clinging to life by a thread. "Help!" The word tore from Running Wolf's throat. "Swift Arrow is here! He is wounded!" Warriors poured from the lodges, their feet crunching on the frozen ground. They met the stumbling horse and saw the truth of it. 2 arrows, lodged deep. His lifeblood was a frozen stain on his buckskin clothes. He'd made it home, but home was the last stop. He wasn't going to see the sunrise. In the medicine lodge, the air was thick with the smell of herbs and burning sage. The healer did what he could, but it was like trying to patch a leaking bucket with a prayer. Swift Arrow, dying, found a strength from some hidden place. His hand shot out, grabbing Running Wolf's arm. "Brother," he rasped, his breath a ragged whisper. "I walk the spirit path soon." Running Wolf could only nod. The words wouldn't come. "My wife, Morning Star, she will be alone." Swift Arrow's eyes burned with a desperate fire. "My son, Little Bear, only 7 summers. He cannot hunt. My daughter, a newborn, still needs her mother. I will watch over them," Running Wolf swore. "They will be my family." But Swift Arrow's grip tightened, his knuckles white. That wasn't enough. "Fort Benton," he coughed, a spray of red dotting his lips. "There is a white woman, a widow, Sarah Miller." Running Wolf's brow furrowed. A white woman? Now? The settlers at the fort were a source of tension, a constant threat simmering just under the surface of a fragile peace. "What are you asking, my brother?" "Her husband died of fever. She has no children," Swift Arrow pushed on, each word an effort. "She knows healing, the fort doctor. He trusts her. She can help Morning Star with the baby." The request was madness. To bring a settler into their camp. It was unheard of. It was dangerous. "Morning Star must teach our son the ways of the warrior. She cannot do that and care for a newborn alone," Swift Arrow insisted. "The widow, she needs protection. Food for the winter. We help her. She helps us." Running Wolf saw the logic, but it was a twisted, dangerous kind of logic. He thought of the stares from the fort guards, the contempt in the trader's eyes. "She showed kindness," Swift Arrow whispered, his voice fading. "When I traded. She was not like the others. She helped Morning Star with a stomach sickness. She has lost so much, as Morning Star will soon lose me." But there was something else in Swift Arrow's eyes, a flicker of something he wasn't saying, a secret buried behind the pain. He spoke of the woman's kindness, but his eyes told a different story. They told of a debt, or a promise, something deeper than a simple trade. As the life drained from his friend, Running Wolf made his vow. He would honor this final, insane wish. By morning, Swift Arrow was gone, and Running Wolf was left with a promise that felt more like a curse. 3 days later, the burial rites were done. Running Wolf packed for the journey to Fort Benton, the weight of his promise a physical thing on his shoulders. Morning Star, her face a mask of grief, met him by his horse. "My husband was wise," she said, her voice hollow but steady. "I trust his spirit. But this white woman, she may not see the wisdom in it. She may not come." "I will speak the truth of it," Running Wolf said. "If she refuses, I will not force her." Little Bear, Swift Arrow's son, watched him with old eyes in a young face. He stood stoic, fighting the tears a 7-year-old boy was supposed to cry. "Will you bring back the helper?" he asked, his voice nearly lost in the wind. Running Wolf looked down at the boy. "I will try, little bear. Your father saw the path ahead. Be strong for your mother." He mounted and rode out. The image of the boy's solemn face burned into his mind. He was riding toward a white settlement to ask a woman he'd never met to abandon her world and join his. It was a fool's errand. But as he rode, a nagging question picked at him. Swift Arrow had been a warrior, cautious, smart. Why would he risk so much on a stranger? Why would he send his best friend into the lion's den for a woman who once gave his wife some herbs for a stomachache? It didn't add up. There was a piece missing from this story, and Running Wolf had a cold feeling in his gut that he was about to find it. Fort Benton was a scar on the land. Wooden walls and square buildings, a monument to the white man's need to tame everything he touched. Running Wolf rode in slow, feeling the eyes of the guards on him like a physical touch. Peace was a word on a piece of paper. Trust was something else entirely. He went to the trading post. The owner, a man named Daniels with a face like cured leather, knew him from past trades. "I'm looking for the widow, Sarah Miller," Running Wolf said, keeping his voice even. Daniels spat a stream of tobacco juice near Running Wolf's horse. "The widow Miller? What's a Blackfeet warrior want with her?" The question was laced with suspicion. "My friend, Swift Arrow, has died," Running Wolf said. His last words were about her. The name softened Daniels, but only a little. "Heard he got himself into some trouble. That's a shame. He was a straight shooter." He jerked a thumb toward a small, lonely cabin at the edge of the fort. "That's her place. Spends most of her time helping Doc Harrison with the sick and dying." As Running Wolf approached the cabin, he saw it was neat, cared for. Smoke curled from the chimney. He knocked, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet cold. The door opened. She was younger than he expected, maybe late 20s. Her hair was pulled back, practical. Her face was worn by the frontier. But her eyes were sharp, alert. And when she saw him, a Blackfeet warrior on her doorstep, she showed surprise, but not a flicker of fear. That was the first thing that was strange. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I am Running Wolf. You knew Swift Arrow." Recognition bloomed on her face. "Yes, I helped his wife. How are they?" "Swift Arrow walks with the ancestors," Running Wolf said. "He was killed 3 days ago." Her hand flew to her mouth, a gesture of shock, but her eyes didn't just show shock. They showed something else, something he couldn't name. It looked almost like guilt. "Please," she said, her voice suddenly tight. "Come inside." He stepped into her home. It was simple, filled with the smell of dried herbs. She was a healer, that much was clear. "He spoke of you as he died," Running Wolf began, watching her carefully. "He left a wife, a son, and a newborn daughter. He asked me to bring you to our camp." Her eyebrows shot up. "To your camp? Why?" He explained the bargain. Her help with the baby in exchange for food and protection through the winter. As he spoke, he watched her face. She was listening, but it was like she was listening for something else underneath the words. "I was a midwife," she said quietly. "But to leave the fort, I don't know. Swift Arrow said you were alone, that the winter would be hard." Running Wolf pressed. She turned away, looking out her small window at the imposing walls of the fort. "The people here would call me a fool, or worse." She paused, then turned back, her jaw set. "How long?" "Until the spring." She was quiet for a long moment. He expected her to refuse. He expected her to call the guards. Instead, she looked him straight in the eye. "I have nothing left here," she said, her voice flat. "My husband, my home, it's all gone. All I have is what I know." Then she said the words that sealed his suspicion. "If I go, I need your word. Your word as a warrior. That no matter what happens, you will see me safe." It wasn't a request. It was a demand. A plea. She wasn't asking for protection from his people. She was asking for protection from something here. Something in Fort Benton. "You have my word," he said. "I'll need a day," she said. "I have to get my supplies." As he left her cabin, the cold seemed to bite deeper. The widow had agreed too easily. Her story about having nothing left didn't feel right. She wasn't running toward a new purpose. She was running away from something. And Running Wolf was starting to think that whatever she was running from, it was the same thing that had put 2 arrows in his friend's back. The journey back was a trial. A fresh snow had fallen, thick and heavy, turning the world into a silent, white maze. Running Wolf broke trail, Sarah Miller following on a mare she'd bought with what looked like every last coin she had. Her supplies were strapped to the saddle, a pathetic bundle of all that was left of her life, or so she claimed. She was a good rider, handled her horse with an easy confidence that spoke of a life before she was a midwife. He watched her as they rode, this woman of secrets. She was quiet, her eyes constantly scanning the horizon, the tree lines, the empty ridges. She wasn't looking at the scenery, she was looking for threats. That night they made camp in a small stand of pines, the fire a small bubble of warmth in a universe of cold. "You ride well," he said, breaking the silence. "My father raised horses," she said, her answer short, clipped. She offered no more. She didn't want to talk about her past. He decided to push. "Why did you agree to this, Sarah?" "The truth." She stared into the fire, the flames dancing in her eyes. "I told you. I have nothing left." "People with nothing left are not afraid," he said. "You are. I see it in your eyes. You look over your shoulder when you think I am not watching." Her head snapped up, her eyes flashing with anger. Or maybe it was fear. "You don't know anything about me." "I know Swift Arrow is dead," he said, his voice low and hard. "And I know he sent me to you for a reason he did not speak aloud. He trusted you, but he did not tell me why." She flinched at his friend's name. He saw it, a tremor that ran through her. She was connected to this. He was sure of it now. "He was a good man," she whispered, her gaze returning to the fire. "He traded fairly. He spoke of his family with pride." "He spoke of you with urgency," Running Wolf corrected. "Like he was sending me to repay a debt." Before she could answer, a sound cut through the night. The snap of a twig. Too close. Too deliberate to be an animal. Instantly, Running Wolf was on his feet, his hand on the knife at his belt. Sarah froze, her eyes wide, staring into the darkness beyond the firelight. They weren't alone. He had felt it all day, that prickling on the back of his neck, the sense of being watched. He moved silently to the edge of the light, peering into the oppressive dark. He saw nothing, heard nothing more. But he knew. Someone was out there. They weren't Crow. They weren't Sioux. The feeling was different. This was white man's tracking. Sloppy, but dangerous. He turned back to Sarah. Her face was pale in the firelight. The fear she'd been trying to hide was now laid bare. She knew who was out there. He was certain of it. "Who is following us, Sarah?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. She shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin, white line. She wouldn't speak. She wouldn't betray her secrets, even now. "They will not have you," he said, and it was a promise. He owed it to Swift Arrow. He would deliver this woman to his camp, and he would uncover the truth that had gotten his friend killed. They packed up in silence, doused the fire, and moved on into the darkness. There would be no more sleep that night. Every shadow seemed to hold a man, every gust of wind sounded like a footstep. The threat wasn't behind them anymore. It was all around them. And whatever trouble Sarah Miller had run from in Fort Benton, she had led it right to him. They rode into the Blackfeet camp just as the sun was setting. The arrival of a white woman sent a ripple of shock and suspicion through the people. Faces peered from lodges, hard and unwelcoming. Children fell silent, hiding behind their mothers. Running Wolf could feel their distrust like a physical force. He had brought a fox into the henhouse. An elder, many horses, met them, his face a roadmap of wrinkles and wisdom. Running Wolf explained Swift Arrow's wish, his words sounding thin and foolish even to his own ears. The elder listened, his dark eyes fixed on Sarah. He spoke to the crowd, his voice carrying the weight of authority, repeating the story. A woman emerged from a nearby lodge. Morning Star. Her grief was a shroud around her, but her back was straight, her head held high. In her arms was a small bundle, and at her side stood Little Bear, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Sarah dismounted, her movements stiff from the long ride in the cold. She gave a slow, respectful nod to Morning Star. "I am Sarah Miller," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I am sorry for your loss. I am here to help." Running Wolf translated. Morning Star's expression was unreadable. She studied Sarah for a long, tense moment, then gave a curt nod. She spoke in her own tongue. "She welcomes you to her lodge," Running Wolf translated. "She asks if you truly know the ways of infants." "Yes," Sarah said, her confidence returning. "I will care for her as if she were my own." Morning Star shifted the bundle, revealing the tiny face of little Otter. The baby was beautiful. Perfect. For the first time, a flicker of genuine warmth crossed Sarah's face. But the moment was broken by a new voice. A harsh, grating voice. A warrior named Stone Hand pushed his way to the front. He was a big man, his face scarred, his eyes small and suspicious. He had always been a rival to Running Wolf, always questioning, always stirring dissent. "A white woman," he spat, pointing a finger at Sarah. "You bring one of them here, to our homes? Swift Arrow is dead because of them, and you bring us another one?" A murmur of agreement ran through the crowd. "It was Swift Arrow's wish," Running Wolf said, his voice hard as flint. "She is under my protection." "His mind was clouded by death," Stone Hand sneered. "Or perhaps it was clouded by something else. What secrets did he share with this woman at the fort? Is she a healer? Or is she a spy, sent to learn our weaknesses?" The accusation hung in the frigid air. Sarah didn't need a translation to understand the venom in his tone. She stood her ground, her chin up, but Running Wolf saw the fear return to her eyes. Morning Star, who had been silent, finally spoke, her voice sharp. "My husband was no fool. This is his will. She will stay in my lodge." Her words carried the weight of a grieving widow, and the crowd quieted. Stone Hand scowled but fell silent, retreating back into the group of onlookers. He had planted the seed of doubt, though, and it had found fertile ground. As Morning Star led Sarah toward her lodge, Running Wolf knew this was only the beginning. The danger wasn't just lurking in the wilderness outside the camp anymore. He had brought it right into the heart of their home. The first few weeks were a fragile truce. Sarah fell into a routine, her days dictated by the needs of a baby. She cared for little Otter with a gentle competence that slowly, painstakingly, began to earn Morning Star's trust. In the mornings, the Blackfeet widow would take Little Bear out onto the plains, teaching him to read the snow, to find the trails of rabbits, to become the man his father was. Sarah, left with the infant, would hum old songs from a life that felt a world away. She was a quick study. She learned a few words of their language, enough to ask for water or to say the baby was sleeping. The elder women, initially hostile, started to watch her with a grudging respect. Her knowledge of herbs was different from theirs, but it was real. She made a poultice that eased the ache in many horses' joints, and a tea that calmed a child's feverish cough. But Stone Hand was always watching. He missed no opportunity to cast suspicion on her. When a food store was found to be contaminated by mice, he suggested the white woman's carelessness was to blame. When a hunting party returned with little to show for their efforts, he muttered that her presence had offended the spirits. He watered the seeds of fear he had planted, and they were beginning to take root. Running Wolf did what he could, but his word was not enough to counter the deep-seated mistrust of the settlers. He found himself watching Sarah, too, not with suspicion, but with a growing curiosity. He saw the sadness that clouded her eyes when she thought no one was looking. He saw the way she clutched a small silver locket she wore around her neck. He knew her secrets were still locked away. One evening, he entered Morning Star's lodge to find Sarah grinding herbs. "The women say you have strong medicine," he said. She gave a small, tired smile. "It's just knowledge, passed down. Stone Hand says it is white man's magic, unnatural." Her hands stilled. "And what do you say, Running Wolf?" He looked at her, at the strength and the sorrow warring in her face. "I say you have honored your word. You have cared for little Otter. You have helped our people." A silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken things. Then, a commotion from outside broke the quiet. A woman was crying, a high, panicked wail. Running Wolf was out of the lodge in an instant. A small crowd was gathering around Stonehand's lodge. Inside, a child was coughing, a terrible barking sound that rattled the air. Stonehand's son. The camp's healer was already there, chanting and shaking a rattle, but the boy's condition was worsening. His face was turning blue, his small chest heaving as he fought for every breath. Sarah appeared at Running Wolf's side, her medicine bag in her hand. She took one look at the boy, and her face went pale. "He can't breathe," she said, her voice urgent. "The passages are closing. Your healer's songs won't help him." She pushed her way into the lodge. Stonehand blocked her path, his face a mask of fury. "Get away from him, witch!" he roared. "You have done this! You brought this sickness to our camp!" "I can help him," Sarah pleaded, trying to get past him. "Let me help him." "No!" Stonehand shoved her back, sending her stumbling. Suddenly, Little Bear was there. He ran to his mother, who had come to see what the noise was about. "The coughing," he said, his small voice trembling. "It is the same coughing the white man's boy had, at the fort, the one who died." All eyes turned to Sarah. The accusation was no longer just from Stonehand. It was in every face. A settler child had died of this same sickness at the fort. And now it was here, in their camp. It had come with her. Panic began to spread like fire. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was terror. Stonehand's son was dying. And the white woman was the only one who didn't look afraid. She looked determined. "Let me help him, or he will die," she said, her voice ringing with an authority that cut through the fear. "Is your pride worth more than your son's life?" Stonehand was frozen, torn between his hatred and the sound of his son choking. It was Morning Star who made the choice. She stepped forward, placing a hand on Stonehand's arm. "Let her try," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Swift Arrow trusted her. We have seen her medicine work. Let her try." With a low growl, Stonehand stepped aside. Sarah rushed to the boy's side, the entire camp watching, holding its breath. She was no longer just a healer. She was on trial. And if this boy died, his death would be her sentence. The air in the lodge was hot and suffocating. Sarah worked with a frantic, focused energy. She sent women rushing for water to boil, creating steam to ease the boy's constricted airways. She crushed herbs from her bag, mixing them with honey to create a syrup to soothe his raw throat. She ignored the hostile stares, the muttered chants of the old healer, the agonizing sound of the boy gasping for air. Running Wolf stood guard at the entrance, his hand on his knife, daring anyone to interfere. He watched her, amazed at her command, her refusal to give in to the panic that gripped everyone else. This was her purpose. This was the core of who she was. Hours passed. The moon climbed high in the sky. The entire camp remained awake. A silent, fearful vigil outside Stonehand's lodge. Inside, the only sounds were the bubbling of the water, Sarah's quiet instructions, and the boy's tortured breathing. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the rhythm of his breathing began to change. The desperate, high-pitched gasps softened. The awful rattling in his chest eased. The blue tinge around his lips began to fade, replaced by a pale but natural color. Just before dawn, he fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. His breathing was even. He was alive. Sarah slumped back, exhausted, her face streaked with soot and sweat. She had done it. She had pulled him back from the brink. A quiet awe fell over the lodge. Stonehand stared at his sleeping son, then at Sarah, his expression a mixture of disbelief and shame. He said nothing, but the hatred in his eyes was gone, replaced by a grudging, undeniable respect. As Sarah gathered her things, her hands trembling from exhaustion, her fingers brushed against the boy's small leather shirt, which had been tossed aside. She felt something hard and sharp tucked into a small pouch at his waist. Curious, she pulled it out. It was a button. A metal button, intricately carved with the image of a hawk. It was not Blackfeet work. It was from a white man's coat. Her blood ran cold. She recognized it. She had seen that button before. At the trading post in Fort Benton. On the coat of the trader, Daniels. She looked at Running Wolf, her eyes wide with a new kind of fear. He came to her side, seeing the button in her palm. "What is it?" he asked. "This," she whispered, her voice shaking. "This belongs to the trader, Daniels, at the fort." Running Wolf frowned. Why would the boy have this? Then Little Bear, who had been watching from the corner of the lodge, spoke up. "He plays a game, with the other boys, trading treasures." His eyes went to the button. "He told me he found it, in the snow, on the day my father did not come home." The pieces slammed together in Running Wolf's mind with the force of a physical blow. The boy had found it on the trail where Swift Arrow had been ambushed. Daniels, the traitor. He was there, but why? What did a traitor have against Swift Arrow? Sarah looked as though she was going to be sick. The guilt he'd seen in her eyes at the fort was back, tenfold. "It's my fault," she whispered, so low only he could hear. "It's all my fault." "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "Swift Arrow," she began, tears welling in her eyes. "He wasn't just trading at the fort. He was helping me. He found out something about Daniels. Something dangerous. He was going to help me escape." The truth was finally coming out. The secret that had cost his friend his life. Swift Arrow hadn't died in a random attack. He was silenced. And the man who silenced him was now a bigger threat than ever. Because if Daniels knew Swift Arrow had told Sarah his secret, then he knew she was a loose end. He would not have stopped hunting her just because she'd left the fort. He would be coming for her. He was coming for them all. The story spilled out of her in a torrent of whispered, frantic words. Her husband, James, hadn't just been a dreamer who fell to fever. He'd been a partner with Daniels in the trading post. A silent partner, providing the money while Daniels ran the operation. But James was an honest man. He discovered Daniels was cheating the Blackfeet, trading whiskey for valuable pelts against the law, and skimming profits. When James confronted him, he had a sudden, violent fever, and died within a day. Sarah knew it was poison. She had no proof, but she knew. Daniels took over everything, leaving her a widow with nothing but a small cabin and the constant, veiled threats that kept her silent. Swift Arrow had been one of her husband's only friends. He saw her fear, her poverty, and he was a good man. He started asking questions, quietly observing Daniel's dealings. He found the proof Sarah needed. A hidden ledger detailing the illegal whiskey trade and the stolen profits. He was bringing that proof to her the day he was killed. "He died for me," she choked out, tears streaming down her face. "He told me if anything happened to him, I was to trust the warrior named Running Wolf. He made me promise." The dying request. It wasn't a strange whim. It was a plan. A desperate, last-ditch effort to save her, to get her to the one man he knew would protect her, and to protect his own family from the fallout he knew was coming. Running Wolf's heart was a stone in his chest. His friend hadn't been just a victim. He had been a hero, trying to expose a rot that threatened both their peoples. "The ledger," Running Wolf said, his voice grim. "Did he have it with him?" "I don't know," Sarah wept. "He must have. Daniels must have taken it when he killed him." Now everything made a terrible kind of sense. The arrows that killed Swift Arrow. They weren't from a rival tribe. They were common hunting arrows, the kind anyone could buy at a trading post, the kind Daniels sold every day. He likely had help, hired men who wouldn't ask questions. The pursuit on their journey here. It wasn't random. Daniels was trying to silence the last witness. "He thinks I know where the ledger is," Sarah realized, her eyes wide with terror. "Or that Swift Arrow told me what was in it. He won't stop." Suddenly, the victory of saving Stonehand's son felt hollow. They had survived a sickness from within, only to face a much greater danger from without. Daniels was not a man to leave things to chance. He knew where Sarah was. He knew that as long as she was alive, she was a threat. He would not come himself. He would be smarter than that. He would use the fragile peace, the tensions between the settlers and the tribes, to his advantage. "He will try to turn the fort against us," Running Wolf said, his mind racing. "He will claim we kidnapped you. He will say we are hostile. He will use the soldiers." It was the perfect plan. He could use the U.S. Army to wipe out the only people who knew his secret and be hailed as a hero for it. The camp was no longer a sanctuary. It was a target. News of the traitors' involvement spread through the camp like a shockwave. The suspicion that had been aimed at Sarah now had a new target. Daniels. Stone Hand, humbled and grateful, became Sarah's fiercest protector, his shame transformed into a cold rage against the man who had nearly cost him his son, and who had murdered one of their own. They had no time to waste. A council was held, the elders listening intently as Running Wolf and Sarah laid out the whole story. The metal button was passed from hand to hand, a cold piece of evidence. "We cannot wait for him to bring war to us," Many Horses said, his old eyes glinting. "We must bring the truth to them." The plan was daring, and incredibly dangerous. They would go back to Fort Benton, not as a war party, but as a delegation seeking justice. They needed to get to the fort's commander, a man named Major Wallace, and expose Daniels before he could twist the narrative. But they needed the one thing they didn't have: the ledger. Without it, it was their word against a respected businessman. "There is a chance," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. "Daniels is arrogant. He believes he is untouchable. He might have kept it. Hidden in the trading post. It would be his ultimate trophy." It was a slim hope, but it was the only one they had. A small party was chosen. Running Wolf would lead. Stone Hand insisted on coming, his desire for vengeance burning hot. And Sarah. She had to come. She was the only one who knew the layout of the post, the only one who could identify the ledger. Morning Star would stay behind to lead in their absence, her quiet strength a pillar for the rest of the camp. The ride back to Fort Benton was a tense, silent affair. They were no longer running from a nameless threat. They were riding directly into the serpent's nest. They scouted the fort from a distance, watching the movements of the guards, the comings and goings of the settlers. The plan was twofold. Sarah, using her established relationship with Doc Harrison and the Major's wife, whom she had treated, would request a meeting with Major Wallace. She would create a diversion, drawing Wallace and Daniels to the Major's office under the pretense of discussing her abduction. While they were occupied, Running Wolf and Stone Hand would slip into the now empty trading post and search for the ledger. It was a plan with 1,000 ways to fail. That night, under the cover of a moonless sky, they crept toward the fort. Sarah slipped away first, a ghost moving through the familiar shadows toward the doctor's house. Running Wolf and Stone Hand flattened themselves against the cold wood of the outer wall, their hearts pounding in time with the pacing of the sentries on the rampart above. They waited. Every minute stretched into an eternity. The fate of their people, the memory of their friend, rested on this desperate gamble. Finally, they saw the signal. A lamp lit in the window of the Major's office. It was time. Moving like shadows, they scaled the wall, dropping silently into the fort's main square. The trading post was dark, its windows like vacant eyes. The front door was locked. Stone Hand, with his immense strength, made short work of it, the sound of the wood splintering unnervingly loud in the stillness. They were inside. The air was stale, smelling of tobacco, leather, and greed. They searched with frantic haste, their eyes scanning the shelves, the storeroom, the main counter. Nothing. It wasn't here. Despair began to creep in. Then Running Wolf noticed the floorboards behind the main counter. One of them was newer than the others, the wood a slightly different shade. He pried at it with the tip of his knife. It came loose. Beneath it was a small hidden compartment, and inside that compartment was a leather-bound book. The ledger. A triumphant grin split his face. He held it up for Stone Hand to see. But their victory was short-lived. The back door of the trading post creaked open. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway. It wasn't Daniels. It was Doc Harrison. And in his hand he held a pistol, aimed directly at Running Wolf's heart. I wouldn't touch that if I were you, the doctor said, his voice calm, but his eyes were cold as a winter grave. That's private property. Betrayal hit Running Wolf with the force of a physical blow. The doctor, the man Swift Arrow had said trusted Sarah, the man they believed was an ally. You, was all Running Wolf could manage. Daniels is a crude man, but a necessary one, Doc Harrison said, stepping into the room. His eyes flickered to the open floorboard. It seems his paranoia was justified. He was convinced you'd come for this. You were a part of it, Stonehand growled, his hands clenching into fists. You helped him kill Swift Arrow. The doctor gave a thin, unpleasant smile. Swift Arrow was becoming a problem, asking too many questions. I couldn't have him disrupting a very profitable enterprise. The fever that took Mrs. Miller's husband was my own special prescription. A pity it had to come to that. He was the poisoner, the true snake in the grass. Daniels was just the muscle, the face of the operation. Sarah? Running Wolf asked, his mind reeling. Does she know? She suspects, the doctor admitted, which is why she, too, must be dealt with. Daniels is taking care of her now at the major's office. A tragic story, really. A distraught widow, captured by savages, finally rescued, only to take her own life out of shame. It was a trap. Sarah wasn't creating a diversion. She had walked right into her own execution. Before Running Wolf or Stonehand could react, the front door of the post burst open. 2 of Daniel's hired thugs stood there, rifles leveled. They were boxed in. The doctor's smile widened. It's over, warrior. You've lost. But he had misjudged them. He saw 2 warriors. He didn't see the rage of a man avenging his brother, or the fury of a father avenging his son's near death. With a roar that shook the building, Stonehand charged. He ignored the pistols, ignored the rifles, a pure force of vengeance. He slammed into the 2 thugs, sending them flying like bowling pins. A rifle discharged, the shot going wide, shattering a jar of preserves on a shelf. In that split second of chaos, Running Wolf moved. He threw the heavy ledger with all his might, catching the doctor square in the face. Harrison staggered back, his pistol firing into the ceiling as he fell. Running Wolf was on him in a heartbeat, his knife at the doctor's throat. The fight was brutal and quick. Stonehand, a whirlwind of muscle and rage, disarmed and disabled the 2 thugs. The trading post was a wreck of shattered glass and splintered wood. Running Wolf hauled the dazed doctor to his feet. The major's office. Now. They burst out into the main square, dragging the doctor with them, Stonehand carrying the recovered ledger. They could hear a woman's scream coming from the office. Sarah. They kicked the door in. The scene inside was exactly as the doctor had described. Major Wallace stood looking shocked. Daniels had Sarah by the arm, a small derringer pressed to her temple. "Stay back!" Daniels yelled, his face slick with sweat. "Or the crazy woman gets it." "Let her go, Daniels," Running Wolf commanded, pressing the knife harder against the doctor's neck. "Your partner has told us everything." Daniels's eyes widened in shock as he saw Doc Harrison, bloody and captured. His plan was unraveling. "He's lying!" Daniels sputtered, looking at the major. "They're savages! They've bewitched the doctor!" But Major Wallace wasn't looking at him. He was looking at the ledger that Stonehand now held open. Even from across the room, the columns of figures, the illegal transactions, were undeniable. "It's over, Daniels," the major said, his voice cold and hard as steel. He drew his own service revolver. Daniels saw it was hopeless. With a snarl of desperation, he shoved Sarah toward the major and made a break for the window. He never made it. A single shot rang out, not from the major's gun. Daniels crumpled to the floor. Standing in the now open doorway, smoke curling from the barrel of a rifle, was Morningstar. Behind her stood a dozen Blackfeet warriors, silent and resolute. She had not been content to wait. She had brought the camp with her. "Justice for my husband," she said, her voice clear and ringing in the stunned silence of the room. The fight was over. The truth was out. Daniels lay dead, and Doc Harrison, his face a mask of utter defeat, was taken into custody by the fort's soldiers. The ledger told the whole story. a sordid tale of greed that had cost good men their lives. Sarah stood, trembling but safe, between Running Wolf and Morning Star. She looked from the Blackfeet widow who had saved her life to the warrior who had honored his promise. Her journey was over, but a new one was just beginning. As the sun rose over Fort Benton, a new understanding was dawning as well. Major Wallace, looking at the stoic warriors and the brave women before him, saw not savages, but allies. He promised a full investigation, and a new, honest trader to be appointed to the post. As they prepared to ride back to the camp, Sarah turned to Running Wolf. The haunted, fearful look was finally gone from her eyes. In its place was a clear, calm strength. "The fort is safe now," he said. "You could stay here. Rebuild your life." She looked out over the plains, toward the distant hills where the Blackfeet camp lay waiting. She thought of Little Bear's smile, and the weight of Little Otter in her arms. She thought of the women who had become her friends, of the people who had accepted her, and the family she had found in the heart of a harsh winter. "My life isn't here anymore," she said, a small smile touching her lips. "My life is there, with my family." She mounted her horse, no longer a refugee, but a woman riding home. As she rode beside Running Wolf, the stone arrowhead necklace Little Bear had made for her resting against her chest, she felt a peace she hadn't known since she was a girl. What started with a dying man's promise had become so much more. It had become a bridge built of loss and courage, connecting two different worlds, and proving that loyalty and family are not defined by the color of one's skin, but by the strength of one's heart. If you were moved by this story of justice and finding family in the most unexpected of places, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what part of the story hit you the hardest. Thanks for joining us.